Alright guys, welcome back. So I wanted to make a separate video kind of going over what happened, how it came about, why I ended up deciding to let go of the blue car. Look, to be honest with you, like the whole weekend at Road Atlanta was internally in turmoil, right? Very, very emotional because like I said in those videos, I truly love that car, But the reality of it is that I'm not a car collector, guys. You know what I mean? If I had the room and I had the money, yes, I would definitely keep that car for who knows how long. I would like to say forever, but for a long, long time. But that's just not the reality for me. I have a limited amount of space, and I don't have unlimited money. I did not have plans to sell the car when I got the phone call or I got the text. Okay, I've known Abram online for a while now, several years, and we just connected through forum and Facebook groups and stuff like that, having to do with tracking the Corvettes, because we all kind of go through the same things, so once you find somebody that kind of you click with, you start bouncing off ideas. We talked about cooling mods and brake pads and all kinds of stuff like that. He always seemed like a really cool guy, you know what I mean? Just somebody that that you can kind of bounce off stuff from and have a nice conversation with. At some point, I had a bunch of stuff for the C7 that I had bought. I had bought Delrin bushings. I had bought an AMT camber lockout kit, which for the non-Corvette guys that don't know, it basically eliminates the eccentric bolts that adjust the camber. And in Corvettes, you have a lot of these bolts because it's a double A-arm suspension front and back. So there's a lot of them. So anyways, in the old cars, in like the C5s and C6s, mostly in the C5s, it is a known issue where these bolts will loosen and they can just move on you while on track. These eccentric things basically make it so that once it's set, they have no possible way of moving because they're kind of locked into the tab. So anyways, I never installed that stuff and I had it for like a couple of years in my garage. So I decided to start selling it, and I promise this is going somewhere, okay? I decided to sell those parts and stuff like that, and I also at the same time decided that I was gonna switch all my wheel setup to 19s. So I had the gold 19s, but then I sold my 18-inch wheels and tires, and then I was picking up another set of 19s to run the Nankangs, the ZRSs. I've been posting all this stuff online and on the forums and stuff like that, so several people asked me if I was selling the car. And I said, no, I'm just selling parts that I just had laying around that I'm honestly not going to install. So Abram hits me up out of nowhere, and he just sends me a text. He goes, hey, do you happen to be selling your car? Or something along those lines. So I was like, no, I'm just, I assumed that he was asking me about all the parts that I was selling. And I was like, no, man, I just had all these parts sitting on in my closet, in one of my cabinets in the garage. But no, I wasn't planning on selling it. Eventually, probably, but no. So he goes, well, I totaled mine. I'm like, oh shit, what happened? He totaled his. He also had a 19. I think it was also a base car like mine. If you guys are familiar with VIR, he crashed basically on turn 11, right? So you come down turn 10, going downhill, and you get all the way to the left. Something happened. He thinks it's some kind of brake failure that he had, and basically went straight into that tire wall. Same spot, almost the same spot where the guy from Gears and Gasoline crashed the Evo for my Evo guys, okay? Except he kind of clipped the first wall and then hit the second wall of tires. Well, Abram hit the first wall head on, 70 miles an hour. Then the car caught on fire. It was a huge mess. And luckily, he made it out, banged up and stuff like that, but no real injury. So very, very lucky on that front. So I was like, wow, man, that really sucks. I'm really sorry for you. So now what? He goes, well, just sell me yours. And I was like, well, listen, everything is for sale for the right price. But I wasn't planning on selling it just now. Just now, I think I got to the point where I started to get really comfortable with the car, okay? Doing the wing and the front splitter really, really transformed the car. And I feel like I was just starting to get into a good rhythm with the car. I already knew all the nuances about the car. I already knew how far I could push, the traction limit before it started getting really squirrely. I was starting to really, really jive with the car. So that was one of the things that I was like, oh man, Now? Really? I told him, I said, let me think about it for a while, and I'll let you know, how much I would need to get for it. And then I asked him also if he wanted to keep all the parts. Do you want it with all the parts? I'm assuming yes, because he's a track guy. He goes, yeah, of course. I'm like, okay, good, because I wouldn't want to put it back to stock and go through that whole ordeal and then having to sell parts separately and all that stuff. I would have just said no. So a couple days later, I thought about it, and I decided, you know what? I'm at the point where I'm gonna have to cut up the car. I'm gonna have to add cooling to the car, because pretty much any track that I go to, within 2 laps, I can get the coolant temp to 235 and the oil 280 or more, And if I just keep pushing, if I stay out there a whole session, then temperatures just continue to rise and rise and rise. So the car really needs a cooling setup. And unfortunately, they all require you to cut up the front of the car. And some people like that, and but I don't. That all stems because I've had a lot of really modified cars, really mostly Evos, and I always go overboard. I always did go overboard. The C7 is just so good out of the box, guys. It really is. For street or track or track only, it's excellent out of the box. You get a lot of stuff in that car that you would want to add or to any other car. Like if you take an Evo, for example. For an Evo, once you put really sticky tires, you really need to upgrade the oiling system. Just recently somebody came up with a good solution for the oil pan, okay, to keep the wet sump, because in those cars, the pickup is all the way to the right of the engine. So when you're making a right-hand turn, all the oil goes to the left, and you can start the pickup, and then wipes out your bearings or whatever. But before, you would have to go to a dry sump system, which is a huge pain in the ass to add into a car. Well, guess what? These Corvettes come with a dry sump system from the factory. It has double wishbone, double A-arm, double wishbone, however you want to call it, suspension, front and back. Okay, that's the ideal setup for maximum camber gain and adjustability for track use. Okay, it's near 50-50 weight distribution, stout, very solid drivetrain. Okay, I never had an issue mechanically with that car. I had a couple hiccups, a couple failures. Okay, I had a spring perch that came like the epoxy broke. I was able to repair that. I had a leak in the heat exchanger because a rock hit it, but that's not, that can happen to any car. What else? Oh, I did the downpipes, but really, the cats were starting to collapse, but I could have taken the car back to the dealership because that is a 10-year warranty on emission stuff. The car doesn't really need any modifications to be extremely fast to go around the track. So I just did not want to go down the path of starting to modify that car. I was always afraid that I would end up doing too much and I would ruin it. So there was that in consideration. The other thing is, guys, I've had this car for almost 6 years. I bought it in November of 2019 and it's now June of 2025. So call it 5.5 years. I got a solid 10,000 miles of actual track mileage, okay? Well over 50 track days, tons and tons of brake pads, tires, oil changes, and all that kind of stuff. I took meticulous care of it, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the crap out of it. So if I got the right amount of money and it's going to the right person, that's what really swayed me to let it go, and I've been thinking about getting something else. I've been thinking about possibly a C8Z06. Even though I talked trash about it on a previous video that you can see here where I reviewed it for a track, the fact is that I love that engine. I love the way it sounds, okay? And for me, that car would be like the closest that I could get to tracking an exotic, okay? Because to me, it sounds exotic. For a kid that came from Colombia with nothing, that's an exotic car for me. So the engine is definitely the highlight, and then it runs cool. There has no heating issues. So those are the two main points about it. Well, and then also that it's mid-engine, mostly rear, but it's mid-engine. So it's a different dynamic that I would like to learn as well. I also been considering a P car, whether it was a GT4 or a GT3 or the like. Again, another one of those like kind of halo cars for me. That's been in the back of my mind. I've talked about possibly get this, or what if I do that? And with some of my friends, so I already had that worm inside my head. I already kind of had told myself that I would possibly enjoy the car for this year and start thinking about it next year. The deal was verbally done. We talked about paperwork, and we kind of proceeded that way. He was willing to give me a deposit. But then I brought up the fact that I say, hey, look, if we're going to do this, then anything would have to be done after I go to Road Atlanta, because it was coming up. It was only 2 weeks away at that point. Obviously, I had already paid for it. And I told him, I said, this is just too fast. I didn't tell him that. I thought to myself, this is too fast. I need some more time. I need to at least track it one last time so I don't feel regretful, okay? So I don't have that in the back of my mind for the rest, for the rest of my life, you know what I mean? He actually was super cool about that. He was like, hey man, what if I just pick up the car from Road Atlanta? I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. I'm totally willing to load my car with all the stuff, track the car, the truck, and the trailer with all the stuff. And yeah, man, if you just want to pick it up from there, then come this Sunday, at the end of the track day, and yeah, you take it from there. So that's what happened, guys. You know what I mean? That's what we planned, and that's how that all went down. Now, because of that fact, I honestly didn't feel 100% comfortable pushing the car the whole weekend. I drove pretty conservatively, to be honest with you. I don't think I drove past like 7/10. I never even brought it all the way up the PTM modes. You would normally go straight to race, but I think I left it either Sport 1 or Sport 2, Sport 2 most of the time. Because I didn't want to, at that point, I didn't want anything to happen, you know what I mean? And he even said, hey, we talked about payment and stuff like that, and he was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable giving you the full payment ahead of time, because what if something happens on track? Oh shit, yeah, that's right, So that was in the back of my mind every time that I was out there on track. So, but everything worked out. I didn't crash the car, obviously. I didn't set any PVs either. But I was very, very happy. What an epic send-off, right? For a car that you love so much, that you track so much, and that's really why you love it. Then for it to go to another guy who's gonna track it, is going to continue, the legacy of that car. I'll be able to see it online, you know what I mean? Maybe, the times that I go to VIR, I'm going to try to connect with him, and hopefully, we can get together and I'll get to see the car again, And the fact that I was able to track it one last time and he took it right from there, I mean, what an incredible story, man. Like, I'm not a storyteller. I'm not good at speeches and talking and stuff like that, but that could have been like some kind of movie, man. Like, you know what I mean? That's the way I see it. And the whole weekend was just riddled with so many emotions of excitement and sadness, and no regret. Okay. The only regret that I do have, but it's honestly not that big of a deal. Like, I really wanted to go back to VIR towards the end of the year. I'm planning on going like October or something like that. I really wanted to get a sub 2 there. I know the car could do it. It's just me that was holding it back. Because I think that the best I ran was like a 204 or something like that. I'll put the lap here if you want to watch it. And that was on the Nankang CRSs. So I was pretty confident that with the new updates, with the aero and also the better tire, the Supercar 3R, that I could get a sub 2-minute lap on that. So that's the only thing that I'm like, I didn't get to do that with this car. Other than that, guys, very, very happy with my ownership of the car, and I can't say it enough. The car will be missed, and who knows, maybe down the line I'll end up getting another one. But if I did, honestly, I think what I would do is I would do a Grand Sport build. I'll probably get a Grand Sport and make it more of a full-out track car. I'm still not going to compete. I'm not a competition guy. But it is getting to the point where, I don't feel 100% comfortable with how fast these cars are. How much I've been able to learn to push these cars. And, I've said it many times on my channel. I have kids. I'm sole provider at home. So I need to get home safe. The Grand Sport idea would be a NA build with, you know, bolt-ons, you know what I mean? Maybe get like 500 or so wheel on that, do a roll cage, do a fire suppression system, and then that way have a car that I'm more comfortable pushing to the limit, you know what I mean? And the Grand Sport would be a setup where, you know, it shouldn't run into overheating issues, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think that would be an awesome build that I would like to do eventually. But that's not gonna be the next car. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the cars that I've considered replacing, or as a replacement for the C7. I mentioned the C8Z. Again, like I mentioned in that review, not my favorite car dynamically, okay, but also I wasn't comfortable pushing that car. So there's that, you know, I'm not really sure that my assessment of the car at that time was because I was already so biased towards my car and I was telling myself that I didn't want one, or just because the car is a little bit softer and that stuff, right? But the engine's compelling, the mid-engine part is compelling, and the fact that it runs cool, there's no issues on that, even in the Florida heat. It's a huge plus for me, okay? So that's a contender for sure. We have the P cars, which would be a GT4 or a GT3. Sorry, this thing just keeps on going. Actually, you know what? Let me disconnect it for now because I'm not speeding, guys. I got a trailer behind me. GT4, GT3. A GT4, it would be like a 718 GT4, so think of 2020 plus, I believe, okay? The appeal with that car is that it's a smaller, lighter car. Again, mid-engine, and if I got it, I would probably get it with the PDK, with the dual clutch, just because, guys, like, I know how to roll gears, you know what I mean? So, and I have the Evo, right? The Evo is also manual, so having two manual cars, yeah, it's cool, but again, I know how to roll gears, you know, so I don't have to have another manual car. I can explore something else, you know what I mean? And that's one thing about the CA that I'm like, I'm not really too thrilled about if I went that route. Just because, to me, if you're gonna go dual clutch, you know, I want it to feel like a dual clutch. And I think that the PDK does, right? A PDK is the best in the business. Everybody says it. Yeah, I would go PDK if I went GT4. My gripes with the GT4 are that, first of all, it's a strut car all around, so it's inherently not as good as a double wishbone front and rear, especially because when you lean on it, double wishbone, because of the way it's set up, you actually gain camber. Okay, so when the wheel tucks in, you gain camber with double A-arm, and that is just not the case with strut. The strut is basically a structural member of the suspension, and it actually has a lot of deflection, so you actually lose camber when it's heavily loaded. So in any strut car, and again, the Evo guys will know about this, you have to run a lot of camber, a lot of static camber for it to not chew out the outside edges of the tire. So that's definitely a negative for me. I've also talked to several GT4 owners and that track it, and they all say the same things, that the stock suspension is really not good. It's like too stiff for the street and not stiff enough somehow for the track. So a lot of them are, you know, switching out to GRZs and MCSs and all that stuff. So, you know, you're spending well over $100,000, and right off the bat, you're already thinking about suspension upgrades. You know, that sucks. They also need, apparently, I don't know if it's toe links or some kind of other links, but it's not just that. You need other parts to be able to actually fully adjust it. You need camber plates for the front. So it needs all these little doodads to really get the full adjustability that you would expect a car like that would have, but it doesn't. But again, it's a lighter car. It's not super light, but it's a lighter car, mid-engine, really pretty car. Really like the factory carbon buckets, so that would be a must for me as well on that car. And it's NA. So, you know, the fact that it's only 400 horsepower, they probably put down like 350, 370 wheel. That's also a little bit concerning, but I know a guy in one of our track groups, Leo, he's ran a 215.9 or something like that, and a GT4 stock, power-wise stock PDK. So, you know, if you see these cars on track with somebody that really knows how to drive them, it's really the amount of time that they spend at wide open throttle or in power. It's a lot greater than these big, heavy, fast cars. So I think that they make it up that way. They're obviously not making it up on the straight parts, which is how I'm used to making up time, to be honest with you. You just blast down the straights with a ton of power. But, you know, with 350, 370 wheel, you know, you're not blasting down the straight line, the straight. So it's really made up in the transitions, the slow, the corners, turning, and how much power they can feed in, how fast what the average speed of their turning is. So very impressive on that side. It would be a challenge for me, you know, to be able to get that car down to those numbers of, you know, mid to high teens. But again, it would require modifications. So then the next contender would be a GT3, but I'll be honest with you guys, the pricing on GT3s is just ridiculous. Okay, it really is. I don't know. Yeah, I don't understand it. Okay, for what you get, I know they're fast, and I know for the amount of power they make, they're extremely well balanced, and somebody that can really drive them can put up really, really good lap times in those cars. And it's not because of power. Okay, again, it's more about, you know, exit speed with the engine in the back. They have a lot of rear traction, so they can put the power down a lot faster. They're much better balanced. Again, it's a lighter car, you know, call it 3,200 pounds or so. Again, very pretty car, but man, I'm not at the point in my life, and I don't know that I'll ever be at the point in my life where I'm comfortable tracking and beating on an 150, 180, a $200,000 car. It just doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, then you talk about what it requires to maintain a car like that. Maybe maintenance is not the right word. How much money is, you know, you would need to keep up with that car, right? How much is insurance going to cost you? Are you going to do track insurance? And now you're track insuring $150,000+ car, you know, and then consumables, you know, because those cars are not bulletproof either. Okay, I've seen plenty of guys that have transmission failures and bearing failures and stuff like that. So I mean, you know, the Porsche tax is real, so maintenance is going to be, you know, way up there as well. And it's not an easy car to work on, right? The engine is, you know, it's back there and it's buried, like you can't barely access it. So that's another thing that concern for me. The big positives is, again, the car's lighter, the PDK would be amazing. That car also does come with an excellent manual, which has better gearing. So I would consider either or. Not in the GT4, because the GT4, the manual gearing is too long, too dumb for the power band of that car. But in the GT3, I think you can get away with it. Again, carbon buckets would be a must for me. And, you know, obviously an NA power band. Now, the things that I don't like is mostly the price. That's the biggest deterrent, but also what you get compared to like a Corvette or, yeah. So like you don't get, the Corvettes come with the PDR. There's really no such thing for the Porsche. You can get the Sport Chrono thing that does a lap timer, but there's no video, there's no data, there's nothing of that nature. And then again, for me, it's like the worry about maintenance. How much is maintenance gonna cost? Oh, and by the way, that would also, both P cars, GT4 or GT3, would be used, because I definitely don't have enough money to buy a brand new one. And my understanding is that even if you wanted to, you're not going to be able to, because they go to their, you know, select clientele that bought many Porsches and all that kind of stuff. And I'm obviously not one of those people. So I will have to buy used. So now I have a loan on a used car, and then I have insurance on a used car, and blah 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 blah. So that's kind of like the decisions that I'm kind of going through the head. I've also thought about like an Emira. I thought about a Lotus Emira, just to be different. But again, going from a C7 to a GT4 or an Emira seemed to me like a big downgrade. You know what I mean? Sorry to my GT4 guys. Those cars are amazing, and I know they can go really, really fast. But the fact is, guys, that I passed tons of them on the track. And it's not because I'm, oh, yeah, I'm passing you and, you know, I'm much faster than you. No, it's just that it's a slow car. You know what I mean? for me to go from a C7Z06 with all that power, I mean, my Evo is faster than a standard GT4. I don't know that I'll be happy with that little bit of power, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, the same thing with the Emira, you know. The Emira, obviously, it doesn't seem to be well prepped for track. I don't know that there's many people tracking them, so that's a little bit of an unknown. So another thing that I really need to mention is on the Corvettes, when the factory warranty does actually cover for you tracking the car. Now, they say that it can't be in a competition, so no timed events, but like HPDE and stuff like that, they do warranty the car even if you're tracking it. So I think that that's a very important thing, especially with these new cars that it seems like they're having, you know, a lot of issues. There's so many electronics and all this stuff that, yeah, I think that you feel more comfortable having a warranty on the thing, you know. And then once that warranty is over, you can extend the warranty through GM. It is managed by a third party, but you're paying GM for the extended warranty. So that's another big plus, because like my C7, even at the point that I just sold it, it was still under warranty. You know, I got the extended warranty, so it was still under warranty. So if something had happened, you know, the engine blows up, the transmission blows up, you know what I mean, something major like that, just take it back to the dealership, you know, and they will put a new engine in it, you know what I mean. Sometimes you have to get feisty with them, but for the most part, it seems like as long as your dealership is not a dick, yeah, GM will just replace the engine, you know. So I mean, that's a huge plus. I don't know if that's the case with the Porsches. I do know that the service centers are much better catered to the customer than GM. You know, I think if you ever dealt with a GM service center or dealership, they're terrible. But I don't know what the extent of their, you know, if a transmission blows up or an engine blows up, I don't really know how that goes with them on the Porsche side. You know, maybe if you guys know, leave it down in the comments. If you have firsthand experience, you know, did your transmission fail or anything major that failed, and then what happened when you took it to the dealership? You know, was the car still under warranty, or maybe you had a CPO, or maybe you had an extended warranty? Yeah, let me know please down in the comments how that was for you, because that's a big thing. You know, I wouldn't want to go and spend, you know, all that money on a used car and then have a major failure and then I'm stuck paying for it out of the pocket. You know, that would definitely leave a very sour taste in my mouth. I think that's why Corvette is such a compelling argument. Okay, it does have its negatives. It's a much bigger, much heavier car, but it has all these little doodads that make up for it. You know, it's cheaper. You know, for the same money or less that I could get a P car, you know, I would buy a brand new one. If you want to, you could spec it out, you can order it. And now that the 26 model year are gonna come out, whatever car you find on the lot it's gonna be heavily discounted. Okay, you can get it with the PDR, which is the performance data recorder, which is what I use to overlay like the speed and the brake and the lap time and stuff like that. I take that directly from the system of the car. So that's a huge plus, because it's not something that you have to set up. It's already there. All you have to do is put an SD card in the slot, and then you have to tell it what track you're on. You could either do it through the head unit system. You mark your start-stop line, and then when you basically it learns the track, okay? Or you can preload it onto your SD card, okay? If you already have the it's like a map GPX, that's what it is, which I already have. So I just put it on the SD card for whatever track I'm going to go to, and it's that simple. And also you can retrieve that data, and there's a software that is more user-friendly it's more user-friendly, as by Cosworth. But if you want to go into really deep data, you can actually use Cosworth Pi, which is a professional motorsports type data logging software, okay? And the data that the car collects works on Pi, because the system is made by Cosworth for GM. So that's a huge plus, obviously. Parts availability, the car has a warranty, you know what I mean? So there's all these positives that is hard to ignore, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm wrestling with right now, guys. All right, guys, I think I've rambled enough and taken enough of your time. If you watch this whole thing, I really appreciate it. This has just been like an emotional and mind dump as to where I'm at and why it all went down. And ultimately, guys, look, I feel extremely fortunate to be in this position. You know what I mean? You know, when I first came to this country, I just did not have any of these options, you know. Never thought when I first came here I'll be to the point where I'll be struggling to figure out what my next track car is going to be. Okay, so I feel very, very fortunate, very, very grateful to be in this position. So I don't want it to come across, you know, that I'm poor me, you know what I mean, woo me. I'm very monotone, guys. So, you know, if you don't sense any emotion in the way I talk and stuff like that, it's just who I am, you know. That was it for the video, guys. I'm not gonna take any more of your time. If you watched the whole video, I really appreciate it, man. And in the next video, I think we're gonna be revealing the next car. I am making a decision today, and I already have a few of these cars scoped out. I already talked to the dealerships. So it's just a matter of me saying, okay, let's go pick it up, okay? So that'll be for the next video, guys. All right, thank you for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.